For today's prophecy update, you're probably going to want to fasten your seatbelts because I'm going to speed through as much as I can, as fast as I can. Emails and texts were still coming in this morning, even on my way here, because there's just so much happening. And yet again, this ominous month of September, which is almost at the halfway point now, is bringing with it a plethora of significant prophetic events. Not just on a daily basis, it almost seems as if it's on an hourly basis now. I should also mention that today, September 13th this year, commences the Feast of Rosh Hashanah, also known as the Feast of Trumpets. Actually, the idiom, "no man knows the day or the hour," is because they did not know the day or the hour that the Feast of Trumpets, or Rosh Hashanah, would begin. It would depend on the position of the moon. And so last night, Israel time, they did not see it, which would have been the 13th for them. The next chance for them to see it will be what's going to be tomorrow night. For us, it'll be early tomorrow morning, very early, like about 5 a.m. Hawaii time. Now, if they see the moon, then they sound the shofar, hence the name Feast of Trumpets, and this particular feast begins. I only mention that, I don't want to go too in depth into this, but it is very interesting, especially this year. Thursday night, Ray Heitzman showed me his daily planner. And he showed me September 23rd, and it wasn't so much what was on September 23rd as much as it was what was not on September 23rd. Now this year, very rare, but this year on September 23rd, it is the Feast of Yom Kippur, 10 days from the Feast of Trumpets. Yom Kippur is the Day of Atonement, and it's this year on September 23rd. That wasn't on his planner, but what was on his planner was the Eid al-Adha, which is the Islamic feast of the sacrifice. And it's just a basic daily planner. He bought it here locally. He didn't buy it. I asked him, "You didn't buy this in Saudi Arabia, did you?" Right? No, I bought it here. And it has listed on September 23rd the Muslim holy day of Eid al-Adha, but it does not have any mention of any Jewish holidays. You know, I have and use Google Calendar. You'll forgive me, but I use Google Calendar because of the convenience. And you can actually, in the settings, set which holidays you want. And I actually set it for the Jewish holidays. Really cool. You can also set it for, when is sunrise and sunset in Hawaii Standard Time, et cetera, et cetera. But I thought it was very interesting that in this planner you would have mention of this Muslim feast. Well, be that as it may, let's begin with Tuesday's sudden and even unexpected release of Kim Davis, the Kentucky County clerk who was put in jail with no bail for refusing to issue same-sex marriage licenses bearing her name because, as a Christian, it was against the Word of God. I actually watched this in my office live, and in disbelief, Shepard Smith of Fox News just started spewing anti-Christian venom. The Examiner published a report on this titled, "Fox News' Shepard Smith Goes on Anti-Christian Rant During Kim Davis Rally." quoting the article, on Tuesday, Fox News' Shepard Smith went on a bigoted anti-Christian rant while covering the rally following Kim Davis's release from jail. Smith suggested in no uncertain terms that Christians are hypocrites for, get this, not wanting Sharia law while advocating Judeo-Christian values in government. The article goes on to quote Smith as saying, and I quote, "Haters are gonna hate." And I watched as he interrupted the live broadcast and they cut to a commercial. And I was stunned. In fact, for one of the first times, if not the first time, I changed the channel from Fox News to CNN. Yeah. I can't even watch CNN on, I used to watch CNN on mute, but I can't even do that anymore because of the, anyway. In Isaiah, we're told that there's a curse to those who call evil good and good evil. And I would suggest that this is exactly what we're seeing now. It's backwards. Evil is good, good is evil. And interesting, evil, E-V-I-L, is backwards live, L-I-V-E. And the world is calling Christians haters, when the fact of the matter is, it's the world who hates the Christians. In 1 John 3, verse 13, the Apostle John said, "Do not be surprised, my brothers and sisters, if the world hates you." In John's Gospel, chapter 15, verses 18 and 19, Jesus said, "If the world hates you, keep in mind that it hated me first. If you belong to the world, it would love you as its own. As it is, you do not belong to the world, but I have chosen you out of the world. That is why the world hates you." Think about that. James said that if you're friends with the world, you're at enmity with God. You're an enemy of God. That you're spiritual adulterers. Again, we talked about this last week. You cannot be both. Either you're a friend of the world or you're a friend of God. Either you're an enemy of the world or you're an enemy of God because you're friends with the world. If the world loves you, beware. Beware when all men speak well of you. When the Lord prayed in John's Gospel, it's recorded, chapter 17, I'll read verses 13 through 18. He says and prays, "I am coming to you now, but I say these things while I am still in the world, so that they," speaking of us, "may have the full measure of my joy within them." That's Psalm 16:11 that we talked about in our 1 Corinthians study. "I have given them your word, and the world has hated them, for they are not of the world anymore, then I am of the world. My prayer is not that you take them out of the world, but that you protect them from the evil one. They are not of the world, even as I am not of it. Sanctify them," listen to this, "sanctify them by the truth. Your word is truth. As you sent me into the world, I have sent them into the world." This is why it is that we are in the world, yet not of the world. Let's turn a quick corner and fast forward to the next day, Wednesday, September 9th of last week. The Sydney Morning Herald news report had the headline, "Deadly sandstorm engulfs Middle East, slows Syria airstrikes." Very interesting. It seems that this sandstorm is the likes of which have never been seen before, such that it virtually blanketed the entirety of the Middle East. Quoting the article, a Cypriot Meteorological Office official told Reuters, "We have had sandstorms before, but not of this intensity. It's very rare for this time of year, too, and it's covering the entire region." Listen, I have seen these sandstorms in the Middle East. My wife and I, in 1997, were in Egypt. In fact, we were to catch a plane that night and go to Jordan. And there was one of the worst sandstorms in the history of the Middle East up to that time, and this is 1997. It was all over the major news networks, and I was there with my aunt in Giza, which is where the pyramids are, and it is so eerie. I cannot even begin to describe for you the feeling. I mean, in 1 minute, in fact, I have it on video, my old camcorder at the time, and it was a beautiful, sunny, hot day in Egypt that day, and within a matter of minutes, all of a sudden, you saw this dark cloud of sand coming your way. And I went out, and I couldn't stay out there very long. I had to cover my mouth and my nose, but I videotaped it. It was like it was in the middle of the night. It was that dark. It was that dark. And pictured here is a satellite photo of this particular sandstorm, and you get sort of an impression of the size and the scope of it. The Times of Israel called it the worst in the country's history. Let's turn another sharp corner. Again, I hope you have your seatbelts on, because this is what it's going to be like for the entire prophecy update. Let's go to Thursday, 9/11, the anniversary. And this Jerusalem Post article about the UN General Assembly passing by a landslide majority a Palestinian draft resolution to raise its flag at the UN. The draft resolution says the flags of non-member observer states shall be raised at UN headquarters and United Nations offices following the flags of the member states of the United Nations. The resolution affects, very interesting, the Vatican as well, as it applies to all non-member observer states. This is huge. The same day, also on Thursday, September 11th, the Jerusalem Post published this article about Israeli ambassador to the United Nations, Ron Prosser, who, as many of you know, I had the privilege of meeting last year. Ambassador Prosser, in his last address, sadly, to the United Nations said, and I quote, "Instead of flying the Palestinian flag, the UN can wave the white flag in surrender of principles." Now, hang on to that, and let's also talk about this on September 11th as well. We learned that Russia and Iran's military buildup in Syria is believed to be part of the secret deal with Iran. I'll quickly quote this Fox News report with the headline, "Russian buildup in Syria, part of secret deal with Iran's Quds Force leader." As the Pentagon warily eyes a Russian military buildup in Syria, Western intelligence sources tell Fox News that the escalated Russian presence began just days after a secret Moscow meeting in late July between Iran's Quds Force commander, their chief exporter of terror, and Russian President Vladimir Putin. Fox News has learned Quds head Qasem Soleimani and Putin discussed such a joint military plan for Syria at that meeting, an encounter first reported by Fox News in early August. Listen to this quote. "The Russians are no longer advising, but co-leading with Iran the war in Syria, one intelligence official said. That's not all that happened on Thursday, September 11th. Again, I watched in disbelief as a 58 to 42 vote, in effect, ensured the survival of the Iran nuclear deal, side deals, secret deals, and all, and this on the 14-year anniversary of 9/11. You'll forgive me, but I do not think that is a coincidence. In Islam, you have to understand, particularly Shia Islam, dates are very, very important. Dates are very important. Don't think for a second that September 11th in 2001 was arbitrary. It was planned specifically on that day. And all you have to do, and in fact, I would encourage you to do this. It's not for the faint at heart. But go online and research the history of what happened on September 11th in Islam, particularly on one particular 9/11 back in history. It is very fascinating and disturbing as well. Indulge me for just a bit. Again, I'm sorry this is so discombobulated, but I got up at 3:30 this morning and I kept adding and adding and adding. And I thought, man, I can't keep adding and adding, because if I keep adding and adding, second service will have to join us, and there's no place for them to park, let alone sit. So you see these pictures on the screen, very fascinating. They both took place in concert with everything else that happened on 9/11. Pictured on the left is a stunning double rainbow filling the sky in New York City over Ground Zero. And this was just ahead of Thursday's 9/11 anniversary. You know what the picture on the right is? That's a photo of a massive bolt of lightning that struck the Grand Mosque in Mecca in Saudi Arabia, also on 9/11. Call me silly, but I don't know. That's, I'll just leave it at that. It gets better. The lightning strike caused a crane to collapse. Now, I don't mean it gets better, because it killed 107 people or injured another 238 people, sadly. But here's what's interesting. As it turns out, the crane was owned by the Saudi bin Laden group. On 9/11, let me just say this. I love it when God does that. That's all I'm going to say. Now, here's the thing. This not only took place on the 9/11 anniversary, it also took place right before the Hajj. What's the Hajj? Hajj is the Muslim pilgrimage to Mecca that takes place in the last month of the year, and all Muslims are expected to make it at least once during their lifetime. This is one of the most massive Islamic holy days that they have. Let's turn another corner real quick and let's talk about this ongoing migrant crisis of Syrian refugees, which is now becoming suspect as of this last week as it relates to the Islamic State infiltration. One has pointed out, and I have it pictured here, do you notice something unusual about this photograph? There are no women and children. These are so-called refugees, Syrian refugees, but they're all Muslim men. Now, that's not to say that there are no legitimate refugees. There certainly are. Many of them are Christian brothers and sisters who are fleeing Islam. Some are even Muslims themselves, but there are many refugees that are fleeing by the multitudes. Last week it was announced that the United States will be taking 10,000 of them to resettle here in the United States. Listen, I'm all for people coming to America, particularly to flee Islam, because that's what my mother and father did when I was 9 months old in 1963. Had they not, I doubt very much that A, I would even be alive, or B, that I would know Jesus Christ. Had they stayed there, they fled back then the oppression, the evil of Islam, and came to America. So they are legitimate, some of them. And what a great and grand and glorious opportunity for Christians to have people come that we can share with them the gospel of Jesus Christ for such a time as this. Bear with me for just a moment. I want to quickly read only the headlines in the interest of time, which to me reveal a very disturbing development with this crisis, this refugee crisis. This first one, Wilders tells Dutch Parliament refugee crisis is Islamic invasion. A refugee boy in Finland caught in lies, really a 20-year-old ISIS member. Terrifying video, and I watched this, you can see this online. Ship with supposed food, water, and aid for Syrian refugees flooding Europe actually contains weapons. And the video, about 10 minutes in length, shows them opening up these packages of supposed aid only to find these weapons, guns. Very interesting. ISIS to Europe. We are coming disguised as refugees and will kill anyone who refuses to convert to Islam. And then this last one. Saudi official says they are deliberately ignoring refugees to allow the spread of Islam to flood the West. I'm going to show you a picture that might make sense and explain this. Saudi Arabia has sitting empty 100, this photograph of 100,000 air-conditioned tents that are able to house about 3 million people. Here's another picture. Look at that. Kind of looks like what the camp of the Israelites would have looked like. The tents, which measure 8 meters by 8 meters, were permanently constructed by the Saudi government in the 1990s and were upgraded in 1997 to be fireproof. Get this. They are divided into camps which include kitchen and bathroom facilities. And they sit empty. Saudis argue that the tents in Mina are needed to host the annual Islamic pilgrimage to Mecca. Besides, if they're deliberately refusing these refugees because they want to spread Islam, well then we need look no further as to the reason. Let's now fast forward to just this morning. Actually in Israel, it was last night where Joel Rosenberg lives, but he posted an article on his blog titled, U.S. and world leaders keep saying the Iran deal will bring, quote, peace and safety. They repeat it like a mantra. Why? Quote, why do President Obama, the UN Secretary General, and most leaders of the international community support the Iran agreement so strongly while only 21% of the American people support it, and most Americans and Israelis see the deal as deeply flawed and dangerous? This is the question I keep being asked in interviews, and it's an important one. The short answer is that most world leaders say the Iran deal is historic and support it because they are convinced it will put the world on the path to, quote, peace and safety. Peace and security. In 1 Thessalonians 5:3, it's the same word in the original language of Greek. While people are saying peace and asphalia in the Greek, which is transferred either safety or security. While people are saying peace and security, peace and safety, while they're saying it, destruction will come on them suddenly as labor pains on a pregnant woman, and they will not escape. They will not escape. The implication being, and we've talked about this on many occasions prior, the implication being that someone does escape, namely we who are alive and remain. Not they, we will escape. I know that I continually repeat this time and time again, week in, week out, but I truly believe with all my heart that we are witnessing in real time the beginning of the fulfillment of Psalm 83, Isaiah 17, Zechariah 12, and of course, Ezekiel 38 and 39. I read a quote, and I think I even shared it a week or two ago, but I don't know how you could write the script better than it's being written right now, chiefly by Russia and Iran, with respect to the prophecy in Ezekiel 38 and 39. I don't know how it's possible. And I also don't know how anyone, and I say this with all due respect, especially to any skeptic, I don't know how anyone could look you in the face and say that Isaiah chapter 17 verse 1 does not apply to Syria today. I can't, for the life of me, imagine how anybody could look you in the eye and say that. Before my father died, he told me to keep my eyes on Syria. And I didn't really understand at the time why. It was on the heels of the Oslo Peace Accord, which was signed on the White House lawn with then President Clinton and Yasser Arafat and Yitzhak Rabin in, do you know which month? September of 1993. I remember calling my dad. I remember it like it was yesterday. I was in the car, and I called my dad. I said, Dad, what does this mean? And his answer to me was, keep your eyes on Syria. I'm like, what? This is the Palestinians and the Jews. This isn't Syria. Assad isn't signing this agreement. He said, no, keep your eye on Syria, meaning that Syria is the linchpin. It's the nexus, if you prefer, catalyst. And it is. Now, today, it's coming into clear focus as we see Bible prophecy coming to pass at breakneck speed, and I think you would agree. You know, I've been accused of being a fearmonger. And by the way, this is probably as good of a time as any to say that I'm not really moved by a lot of the comments that we get. I'm not that thin-skinned, believe me. I learned long ago that if you're going to be in the ministry, and particularly if you're going to be a teacher of Bible prophecy, as one said, you have to have the mind of a scholar, the heart of a child, and the hide of a rhinoceros, or you will not survive. I'm not moved. They don't, affect me. In fact, if anything, they grieve me because I feel so much compassion for the lost person who said it. But one of the things that I've been accused of over the years is being a fearmonger. And I'm sad to say that by some well-intentioned Christians, I have been accused of this. And listen, while God hasn't given us a spirit of fear, but of power and of love and of a sound mind, I believe that fear may in fact be the problem. And let me explain what I mean by that. There's no fear of God. There's no fear of God. Romans 3:18 says, there is no fear of God before their eyes. Proverbs 10:27 says, the fear of the Lord prolongs days, but the years of the wicked will be shortened. Brings to mind what Jesus said, that were the days not shortened, no flesh would survive. No flesh would survive. Proverbs 14, verses 26 and 27 say, in the fear of the Lord there is strong confidence, and his children will have a place of refuge. I like that. He is our refuge and our strength, our ever-present help in times of trouble. Verse 27 says, the fear of the Lord is a fountain of life, to turn one away from the snares of death. I want to end sort of differently than what we usually do. And I want to actually end sort of how we began, in the sense of Christians being haters. I think in some ways we could be rightly accused of being a hater, not of people, but of evil. I want to, in conclusion, share with you two more Proverbs passages, the first of which is Proverbs 8:13. It says, the fear of the Lord is to hate evil. Pride and arrogance and the evil way and, listen, the perverse mouth I hate. What? God hates? I thought God was love. How can a loving God hate? Oh. That's Proverbs 6, verses 16 through 19. These 6 things the Lord hates. Yes, 7 are an abomination to him. A proud look, a lying tongue. By the way, as I'm reading these, try to connect some dots. A proud look, a lying tongue. You'll forgive me. Gay pride? A lying tongue? How about this one? What comes to mind with this? What dot gets connected with this one? Hands that shed innocent blood. A heart that devises wicked plans. I think of Iran. Feet, wicked plans. You know what their plan is, right? The destruction of America. Death to America. The Ayatollah Khamenei, even as Secretary of State John Kerry is sitting with his counterpart negotiating this deal with the devil, which is what it is, they are chanting death to America in Farsi for all to see. You know, this morning, I'm sorry, but this morning, we're almost done. Don't look at your watches. Don't look, I said. I appreciate your patience. This morning I was thinking about this. And you'll forgive me, but this election process is a circus. It's just a circus to me. With all due respect to the many candidates, I don't want to wax political, but I just about can't take it anymore. Well, I might as well just say it, especially now that I just said what I was going to just say it. This Iran deal, forget presidential elections. Really? You know what James said? Man, Pastor, you're getting kind of heavy here. Well, maybe I need to be. You know what James said? Don't say we're going to go into such and such a city and make a profit there. We're going to say, Lord willing. Everything should be prefaced with Lord willing. Lord willing, we'll have elections. Is there going to be a United States of America that Iran is chanting death to next November? On Thursday, I attended a meeting with area pastors for Franklin Graham's Hope for America tour of all 50 states. And I prayed on the way there, and I even prayed in anticipation of being there, that I wouldn't open my mouth. Because it just doesn't, I don't do well in those kinds of settings, but I'm just listening there, and I please don't misunderstand my heart. I have nothing but respect and love for my fellow pastors and leaders. But and it was one of those things where after I said it, I thought, Lord, I said, don't let me do that, but I just blurted out, I think it's too late. I think it's too late. And the collective gasp in the room, gosh. I never get invited back to these things. I don't know. I'm a big fan of Franklin Graham, actually, and I do support any effort, certainly, to pray in prayer rallies. In 2002, I had the privilege of serving on Franklin Graham's executive committee for a festival on the mainland when I was pastoring there. I even had the privilege of meeting and talking with Franklin Graham, whom I greatly admire. And this was right after 9/11. This was in 2002. So that's why we're so invested in Operation Christmas Child. I mean, Samaritan's Purse and the Billy Graham Evangelistic Association just really have been mightily used of God in the lives of countless people. But I just found myself sitting in this meeting thinking to myself, we should have done this years ago. I don't want to sound so hopeless, but I have no hope in this country, in elected officials, in politicians. I have no hope. And I wonder sometimes, and I know I've said this before, but I wonder sometimes if God isn't loosening his grip, the tight grip that Christians have on America. I wonder. Is God readying us and steadying us by getting us to loosen our tight hold on this country? The list continues. Feet that are swift in running to evil, a false witness who speaks lies, and one who sows discord among brethren. You are so patient, and I thank you so much for giving me your ear and your attention. Would you please stand? We'll pray. Loving Heavenly Father, yes, it's a hard word. I think of the disciples whom you asked when the multitudes left after the teaching of a hard word, and you queried them, asking them, "Are you too going to leave?" And I think of Peter, who responded by saying, "Where else are we going to go? You alone have the words of life." Lord, where else are we going to go? You alone have the words of life. You are Jesus, the life, the way, and the truth. And I pray, God, for anyone that might be here in this amazing church that I'm privileged to pastor, that has never called upon you, believing in their heart or confessing with their mouth that Jesus is Lord, that you raised him from the dead. Lord, I pray that today would be the day of their salvation. For anyone that might be watching this online, I believe God led you to this YouTube channel for such a time as this. He's been nudging you and leading you and even wooing you to him. Maybe he's even ruined you for him and brought you to this place of brokenness and surrender. Surrender today. Surrender today. Lastly, Lord, come quickly. Come quickly. Maranatha. In Jesus' name, amen.